So Pam Bondi told Congress under oath that there are pending investigations into people connected to this case, which is interesting because 10 days earlier, her own deputy attorney general went on national television and said there was, and I'm quoting, nothing in there that allowed us to prosecute anybody. So either the two highest ranking people at the DOJ are misleading the public, misleading Congress, or they genuinely have no idea what's happening inside their own department. And honestly, at this point, all three options feel equally plausible. During the House Judiciary Committee hearing on February 11th, where Republican Congressman Chip Roy of Texas questions her about the case, and the exchange ends with her making a claim that directly contradicts what her own deputy said on CNN just days before. The entire exchange is set up like a softball. Roy is a Republican ally. He's teeing her up to take credit for the Trump administration's role in the case. But watch what happens at the very end, because her last answer is where the whole thing falls apart. Let's watch this hearing, and I will break it down at the end.
From Texas is recognized.
I thank the chairman.
May I have 20 seconds, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Let's hear the opposition research.
Thank you. That's absolutely right, that they're not running for, he's not running for office again because, well, I don't know why you're not running for office again, but after the filing deadline, you publicly announced you would not run when your chief of staff, Patty Garcia, announced and took your seat.
That's a state matter. That isn't a federal matter. You should investigate crimes.
You
should investigate
violations of
the law.
The time belongs to the gentleman from Texas.
And a little flexibility on the time. I appreciate the chairman. Madam Attorney General, am I correct that under your leadership, the Department of Justice has prosecuted cases of non-citizen voting? So it's false, as some of my Democratic colleagues have claimed, that it doesn't happen.
Yes.
I ask that today because we're voting on the Save America Act today to enact common sense policies to ensure only American citizens vote in American elections and enact federal voter ID laws. But it's true, for example, that in just this month, a federal grand jury in Newark indicted two men with illegally voting in federal election and making false statements. Mohammed Mazammel and Mohammed Shakil were non-citizens at the time they registered to vote. This happens, it happens regularly, and you're prosecuting those crimes, correct?
Yes.
But does that prosecution of those criminals overturn their previously cast votes?
That's all pending.
But it does not overturn votes that they've cast, right? So passing the Save America Act would help deal with that problem.
Yes, Congressman.
Second question. As Attorney General, you're in charge of the Executive Office of Immigration Review, correct?
Yes, Congressman.
The Biden-Mayorkas regime caused the immigration court case backlog to explode, correct?
Explode.
Does that sound about right that in September of 2020, 4 months before President Biden took office, there was a backlog of 1.5 million cases, but by the time President Biden left office, the backlog reached nearly 4.2 million cases?
It sounds about right, but I don't have the exact numbers.
It would be accurate to say that most individuals who file for asylum have a meritless or fraudulent claim?
Most. I don't have the numbers.
Oh, so does it sound correct that of the asylum cases adjudicated in FY 2023 under the Biden regime, that only 14% resulted in an asylum grant and only 12% in fiscal year 2024? Does that sound correct?
It sounds correct. I'm sorry, I don't have the numbers.
Could you get that information to us to verify that data?
I'll get all that information to you.
Under the Trump administration, immigration judges complete an average of 65,000 cases per month, the highest average completion rate in at least a decade. Does that sound correct?
That sounds correct.
Ms. Bondi, how many new cases under EOIR received in fiscal year 2025 have you all had? And of those, what percentage have been granted asylum? Do you know?
I can try to get you those numbers. I thought I had those.
That'd be great, because my question is whether President Trump's decision to pause asylum in the wake of the shooting of a National Guardsman by an Afghani here in Washington, D.C., in the nation's capital, helped to stop the backlog in your office. Does that sound correct?
Yes, Congressman.
My point being that the leadership of this administration is ending the backlog, reducing the backlog, making sure that we don't have fraudulent asylum claims clogging it, and keeping Americans safe. Is that correct?
Yes, Congressman.
So a couple other quick questions on another important topic that has been raised by colleagues on both sides of the aisle with respect to the Epstein case. A few questions. One, Jeffrey Epstein was charged in July 2019 for sex trafficking under the Trump administration in his first term. Is that correct?
Yes, Congressman.
And that Ghislaine Maxwell was charged in 2020 also under the Trump administration, correct?
Yes, Congressman.
So it is safe to say that the administration led on that issue and that there was silence in the previous administration. Is that correct?
Yes, Congressman, almost complete silence from everyone who's been trying to still talk about Epstein. They didn't say a word under the Biden administration, nothing.
And I want to make one other point and then another question, though, that is important. I want to make one observation, and that is that we've heard the information today, which is troubling, that Jane Doe's, that victims' information was made public and was unredacted in the files that were released on Friday. So my question is, some of us had argued when we were dealing with the discharge petition in Congress that when Congress inserted itself into the process, that we needed to be very careful to ensure that we were protecting victims. So a question that is both, I just want to make that clear that some of us were fighting for that here and we didn't get a chance to amend it or change it. So that was concerning. But a question a little more pointed, I have to say, is why, though, were the victims' names released that shouldn't have been? That there were names in the files, that these Jane Does, that their names shouldn't have been made public when there were some accusers whose names were redacted? That's question one. Mm-hmm. And question two was that Ghislaine Maxwell was put in jail for trafficking minors. Rightly so, and you properly said here at this table, you hope she dies in jail. Well, I want to know, will anyone besides her or Epstein, which I congratulate President Trump's previous administration and this Department of Justice for continuing all of that, but that they were indicted, but will anyone else be indicted and prosecuted under this, given the information that's in front of us? So two questions.
Thank you for letting me answer that. They didn't want to hear my answer on the other side. Yes, given the tight time frame of 30 days, I believe we got everything released within a little over 60 days. I'm talking as fast as I can. My time is up. We did the best we could immediately. If everyone's been coming to view the documents, if someone's name should not have been redacted, we're releasing it. If someone's name was redacted, we said right away, was not redacted and should have been, meaning a victim. We went back and redacted it. We're doing everything we can based on the tight time frame and over 3 million pages that we released that Donald Trump signed for pure transparency. Second, what was your second question?
About whether another individual will be indicted.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for asking that. And they never wanted to hear the answer to that. We have pending investigations in our office.
Time of the gentleman has expired. Unanimous consent request from the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you.
Okay, so if you're sitting there feeling like something doesn't add up, you're right, because it doesn't. And I want to walk you through exactly why that last exchange matters more than it might seem on the surface. Here's what you need to know. On February 1st, just 10 days before this hearing, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche went on CNN's State of the Union and told Dana Bash, and I'm putting this in my own words, but it's close, that the DOJ had gone through the files and found nothing they could prosecute. He told CNN the department's review was basically done. He pointed to an FBI memo from July of 2025, a memo that, by the way, nobody even signed their name to. And that memo said there wasn't enough evidence to even open an investigation into anyone else connected to the case, not charge anyone, not bring anyone to trial. They said there wasn't enough to even look into anyone. And then 11 days later, she sits in front of Congress and says they have pending investigations in our office. And CBS News reported that this statement appeared to directly undercut what her own deputy had said publicly. So which is it? Are there pending investigations, or is the review over? Because those two things cannot both be true at the same time. And here's where it gets even more revealing. According to NPR, back in November of 2025, after Trump publicly demanded on Truth Social that the DOJ investigate the case's ties to Democrats, specifically naming Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, and Reid Hoffman, she immediately complied, assigning Manhattan U.S. Attorney Jay Clayton to lead a probe. None of them had been accused of anything by the actual survivors. Meanwhile, the files also mention Republicans, including former Trump advisor Steve Bannon, current ambassador to Turkey Tom Barrack, and tech billionaire Peter Thiel, and none of them were named in the investigation. So when she tells Congress there are pending investigations, the question isn't just whether those investigations exist, it's who they're targeting, why they started, and whether they have anything to do with actual justice for the survivors sitting in that room. Because here's the part that should make you furious. The Wall Street Journal went through the files and here's what they found. When the DOJ released those 3+ million pages at the end of January, at least 43 survivors' full names were exposed, including more than 24 who were minors at the time. Some names appeared over 100 times. Home addresses were visible through keyword searches. Attorneys for the survivors said they'd given the DOJ a list of 350 names to redact back in December, and the department apparently didn't even run a basic keyword search. Survivor Danielle Bensky told NBC News that what she assumed were confidential conversations with FBI investigators had been dumped into the public files. She said it initially felt like carelessness, then incompetence, and now, in her words, it feels a bit deliberate. So you've got a Department of Justice that exposed survivors' names, while at the same time redacting the names of the powerful men named in the files, including Les Wexner, who the FBI had flagged in their own documents and whose name was only restored after Congressman Thomas Massie literally caught them in the act. As Massie put it to her face, "In 40 minutes of me catching you red-handed." And just to put a fine point on how absurd this has gotten, during this very hearing, she was photographed holding a printed document labeled Jayapal Pramila Search History, which appeared to be a log of exactly which case documents Democratic Congresswoman had searched while reviewing the files at the DOJ headquarters. Jayapal's response? She called it outright spying on members of Congress. Even House Speaker Mike Johnson said it would be inappropriate if it happened. So to recap the DOJ's approach to these files, they exposed the names of young survivors, redacted the names of powerful men, tracked which documents members of Congress were reading, and are now at the same time claiming there's nothing to investigate, and also that they're actively investigating. That's not transparency. That's not accountability. That's a cover-up in a transparency costume. And the strategy? It's not complicated. You tell the public there's nothing to see. You tell Congress you're looking into it. You launch investigations into your political opponents by name while shielding everyone else. And if anyone asks a follow-up question, you call them unprofessional and accuse them of theatrics, which, by the way, is what she said to a congresswoman who asked her to turn around and apologize to the survivors sitting directly behind her. The next time someone tells you this administration released the files to pursue accountability, here's what you say. They exposed the survivors, protected the powerful, and used the investigation as a political weapon. That's not justice. That's the opposite of justice with better branding. What does this all come down to? For the survivors, the real people at the center of this, it means the government that was supposed to protect them has now exposed their names, their addresses, and the most personal details of what happened to them to the entire internet, and not by accident. Their attorneys told NBC News that these documents have been downloaded, copied, and preserved, and once that happens, it can't be undone. As the attorneys put it, the harm is permanent and impossible to correct. Some survivors have reported being harassed with deeply disturbing private messages since the release. Imagine trusting the FBI with the worst thing that ever happened to you, and then finding out the government published it for the world to see while redacting the names of the men who hurt you. For the rule of law, this sets a precedent that should terrify everyone, regardless of party. The deputy AG says there's nothing to prosecute. She says there are pending investigations. The DOJ is surveilling members of Congress who are exercising their oversight authority, and the investigations that do exist were launched at the direct request of the president targeting his political opponents by name, with no equivalent scrutiny of allies mentioned in the same documents. Remember that FBI memo I mentioned earlier, the one nobody even signed? CNN's reporting confirms it flat out said there wasn't enough evidence to even open a case. Now, just yesterday, the day before I'm recording this, British police arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly known as Prince Andrew, on suspicion of abusing his government role, basically, that he may have shared confidential information with the convicted financier while serving as the UK's trade envoy. CNN put it simply, the FBI's claim that there was nothing worth investigating. Turns out that was, and I'm quoting CNN here, a rather rash conclusion. So foreign law enforcement is making arrests based on information the American DOJ said was worthless. Think about that. And for what? What is any of this actually for? Is it for the survivors? They can't even get an apology. Is it for transparency? They tracked which documents Congress was reading. Is it for accountability? They redacted the names of the powerful men accused of being involved while exposing young survivors. The only investigation launched with any urgency was the one the president ordered targeting Democrats on Truth Social. And remember, this is the same administration that fought the release of these files for months, called Republicans who supported transparency stupid, and only signed the bill after a bipartisan discharge petition forced their hand. The Transparency Act passed with near unanimous support despite the White House actively trying to kill it, which tells you everything you need to know about whose interests they're protecting. It's worth noting what survivor attorney Brad Edwards told reporters. He said the DOJ had 350 survivor names to cross-reference, and all they had to do was run a keyword search. The Wall Street Journal reported he called the failures literally thousands of mistakes. His colleague, Brittany Henderson, went further in official court documents filed with the judges overseeing the case, and I'm paraphrasing here, but she basically wrote that there is no version of "we just messed up" that explains how you fail this many times. This consistently, when your one job was to black out the names you already had on a list. In other words, oops doesn't cut it when oops happens thousands of times in the same direction. Here's where things stand. The DOJ has released roughly 3.5 million pages. Survivors' names are still showing up in the files, unblocked, unprotected. The AG and her deputy have said two completely different things in public about whether investigations are even happening. Bondi was caught with what sure looks like a printout tracking what a congresswoman was reading. And the first arrest to come from these files didn't happen in America, it happened in the United Kingdom, where police apparently found enough in 10 days to arrest a former member of the royal family, while American authorities spent 7 months insisting there was nothing there. This isn't about whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. This isn't about which political figures were in the convicted financier's orbit. This is about whether the Department of Justice is using the biggest case of its kind in modern American history as a political tool while actively failing the people it harmed. And the darker question, the one nobody in that hearing room seemed willing to ask, is whether the contradictions, the botched redactions, the surveillance, and the selective investigations aren't bugs in the system, but the system working exactly as designed. Turns out, you can post that Eiffel Tower selfie as long as nobody's allowed to ask follow-up questions. If you found this breakdown helpful, hit the like button so more people see it. Drop your thoughts in the comments, I read them all and want to hear what you think. Share this video with someone who needs the context, and click the bell so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more.